Hi, guys. Good morning. Good afternoon. We are exactly at noon. Happy Thursday. This is another episode of the Healing Hour, and I am your trusty host, Sarah Fargo O'Brien. I am a licensed psychotherapist here outside of Richmond, Virginia. I am also a trauma-informed leadership strategist and content writer, speaker, trainer, webinar host, all kinds of things in the world as a means to get the message of healing out and what helps people feel healed, which includes feeling whole, feeling safe, and feeling belonging. And July and August have brought the Healing Hour podcast topics that are near and dear to the clinical practice that I do with adults with mental health diagnoses in my private practice. And so catch some of those past shows. We have the neuroscience of anxiety, the neuroscience of addiction, the neuroscience of trauma. Last week I talked about complex PTSD, and today we're going to get into betrayal trauma. And later this month, a couple of more diagnoses or treatment areas that I focus on in my practice. So that's what the Healing Hour is about. We're at another episode. We're a little bit off time today. It's at noon instead of 11, at 11 o'clock today. For those of you who don't know, I have another job. I was telling my best friend the other day, I was like, I have like 7 jobs now. But I've recently been hired as a faculty at Cleveland State University, and we had a meeting this morning at 11. And so I had to move the time. But we are here and we are going to dive in. So if you're here, let me know that you're here. I'd love to give you a shout out. And of course, I appreciate anybody who shows up. Who do we have? Hello, my friend, Chasen Forehand. So he is the founder, I guess, is what I can say. For the nonprofit HR4U, an extension of that Transformation Kitchen. And it's really cool. I get to work with Chasen at his organization as the director of student wellness. And it's awesome work. And he's a dear friend of mine. Thank you for your kind words, Chasen. He says, I always appreciate the wisdom you share and the answers you provide. I really appreciate that. Like I always say, guys, I'm like a nobody, basically. I'm a nobody in the world, here in Virginia. And so anybody that takes anything away from the things I say really mean a lot to me. My hope is that people feel informed and therefore empowered because they are informed. Jason, what else do you have? Oh, yes. He's excited to open his first Transformation Kitchen location in the U.S. And I will be helping his students there, of course. And I can't wait for that too. Jason got to open a Transformation Kitchen in Nicaragua in June, I think. And that was like a really great experience. So check out what he has going on. I know he has a big event, maybe a fundraising event up in October. So go check out Chasen Forehand, HR4U, and Transformation Kitchen. As always, I appreciate that you're here, friend. Thank you. He says, you are somebody very helpful, right? I'm saying I'm nobody here out in Virginia. All right. I think that's it for announcements. Let me do my check-in and my deep breaths, even though I kind of told you guys a little bit what I was doing this morning and where we're headed for today's show. It's been kind of a busy morning, normal morning. Get up, walk my dog, get ready, check emails, LinkedIn, all the things. I don't know. I'm in this community group for a white paper. I got Slack channel to check. I got LinkedIn to check. I got my own emails. And like I said, I got another email. I'm a faculty at this place. It's a lot of communication stuff I've been trying to keep up with this morning. And then of course I had my faculty meeting, and now I'm here with you all. This afternoon, I have my own therapy appointment, which will be good. I am trying to tackle something this year, and that is addressing a situation that I had with a friend like a year and a half ago. We've sort of had to kind of take a break since then for my own nervous system. And I want to talk with my therapist about how I approach that conversation. So Even the helpers need help, guys. Like, I can tell you guys had that conversation, but when my own feelings get involved, it's a little bit more difficult. This is the practice of trauma-informed care in real time. I have to learn to check myself, to have my resources, to find my grounding and my safety, and to be able to communicate in the best way possible without causing more harm, which sometimes is not easy for me when I'm triggered in my trauma, which you guys know, if you know anything about me, have watched anything before. Okay, let's do 3 deep breaths to get grounded so I can stop at you guys so quickly and tripping over my words. So if you want, get grounded with me, 3 deep breaths. I'm going to be talking more about deep breathing next week in some of my posts. And this is a big topic of what we're going to be talking about in the mental health content in the Integrate Trauma Informed Network app. So we have an app that helps support your mental health and your well-being, and our affinity group members create content for that. And breathing techniques and how that's helpful for the nervous system is going to be the topic of content in our app in September. Right now, the content is on vagus nerve, which also is good stuff to know for the nervous system, and some daily practices to help with vagus nerve health, which is good for overall health. So be sure, that's another organization and a job that I have that I'm a part of. Integrate Trauma Informed Network has fantastic resources for nervous system care, for trauma informed care, and for trauma informed leadership. So go check that out. Okay, deep breathing in through your nose, out through your mouth. Here we go. Exhale slowly. Again, in. Exhale slowly. One more. And out. Okay, let me get my slide deck back up here. Today we're talking about betrayal trauma. And I'm also actually supposed to be guesting on a podcast on this very topic next week on somebody else's podcast. So when that comes to fruition and comes out, be sure to let you guys know, and be sure to follow me or, check my network, check my feed for when that gets posted. I think we'll be talking like a little bit differently. I have some different questions to answer for that podcast. What I like to do in this podcast is almost like a mini webinar for you guys. I like to give you information, education, some real world examples, sometimes some personal examples, and then let you know how I can help you in the future with this topic once we move beyond talking about it today. Grab your coffee, tea, water as we dive in. Hi, Andrew. Glad to see that you are here. Thanks for joining us. Betrayal trauma. What do we know? What do you know about it? I was telling my best friend that I was going to guest on a podcast here coming up on betrayal trauma. And she goes, "What's betrayal trauma?" And so I tell her, and I was like, basically, I'm coming on to guest as an expert in this. And then I give her the definition. She was like, "Oh yeah, I'd say you're an expert in that." I was like, "Thanks." An expert in it, not just because I've learned about it, but because she knows about all my life experiences. And guys, honestly, at this point, I can't count the number of betrayal traumas I have experienced. It's a lot. It's the most significant and pervasive kind of trauma that I have experienced. And it might be you too. So I want to make sure that we know about it. We know what to look for, and maybe we know what to do. So betrayal trauma occurs when someone's trust or well-being is violated by an institution or person they depend on for physical, emotional, or financial security. So we're going to be talking about what is betrayal in general, and then what is betrayal trauma. We're going to be talking about different types of betrayal trauma and the relationships in which those betrayals can exist. The impact. So you guys know that I like to talk about like the neurophysiological impact of trauma and these things. And so we're going to be talking about behavioral responses and symptoms and the role of denial and how that's impactful in somebody's life, and risk factors for being victim to betrayal trauma or betrayal trauma situations. Okay, so let's talk about what betrayal is and what betrayal trauma is. So these first few things are examples of betrayal. I look up either, Webster's, Cambridge Dictionary, whatever online, and I grab a couple of definitions for you guys just to get an idea of like what are we even talking about. Let's get some shared language going on here with some definitions. So betrayal is the act of not being loyal when other people believe you are loyal. One of my favorite definitions right there, and it's about as clear as you can get. The betrayal is also the act of disappointing a person's trusts, hopes, or expectations. Betrayal is the act of revealing information in violation of confidence. Betrayal is failure to keep or honor a promise, principle, or cherished memory, etc. And then betrayal trauma, that's this one here, occurs when someone violates your trust, often in significant relationships, leading to emotional distress and long-lasting effects on your mental health. So this can also be defined as, betrayal trauma can be defined as the emotional impact experienced when a person's trust or well-being is violated by someone they depend on, such as a parent, caregiver, or romantic partner. Now, in betrayal trauma, you may not be in physical danger, but your fear and anguish can feel just as powerful, and I can attest to that. So more about what it is exactly, and this idea that this betrayal trauma specifically occurs when someone's trust or well-being is violated by an institution or person they depend on for physical, emotional, financial security. This is what I talked about with the first slide. And so trauma can happen to anybody at the hands of a stranger, somebody you don't know. But betrayal trauma requires a significant relationship between the perpetrator and the victim. It means that there is some level of relationship there, friendship, parent-child relationship, right? Institutional relationship, whatever the case may be. There is a we know each other aspect to betrayal trauma. How well we know each other is maybe on a spectrum, but there is definitely a we know each other. And it's because we know each other that it feels like and is betrayal. It's hard to be betrayed by a stranger who isn't loyal to you for anything, unless, of course, it's an institution, but then there's a relationship there. And so I think that is an important piece. And when trauma happens as a result of a betrayal from a person, an institution that you have a relationship with, the impact is negative and extremely painful because you are expecting something different from this relationship, from this person, as a result of having the relationship to begin with. When we have relationships with people, that comes with expectations. We can't always meet those expectations, but they do come with that. And I think it's fair to say that if we have a relationship with somebody, then there's a certain level of trust there. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to engage in a relationship with somebody. So when betrayal trauma happens as a result of a relationship, trust is absolutely broken. That is clear. And that is part of what is really difficult for people. This concept of betrayal trauma was first introduced by psychologist Jennifer Freed in 1991, and highlighting how betrayal can lead to significant psychological distress, especially when the betrayer is a primary attachment figure, like a parent or a caregiver, or a romantic partner. Betrayal is often associated with being hurt by a romantic partner, but betrayal trauma can come from other sources as well. Like I said, it just doesn't have to be that kind of relationship. It can be other relationships. So what does that mean? Some of the forms of betrayal trauma include romantic betrayal, institutional betrayal, and familial betrayal and interpersonal betrayal. So let's go back and talk about these one by one. Romantic betrayal. Let's see if I can get these in the chat at the same time. Romantic betrayal, institutional, as I'm trying to spell here, guys. Betrayal is where we'll get started. Romantic betrayal is when a romantic partner is unfaithful or otherwise behaves harmfully. So if they're not unfaithful in terms of infidelity, having an affair, cheating on somebody, and another example of behaving harmfully within a romantic partnership would be one partner abusing drugs without the other partner's knowledge. That is an example of a betrayal. Infidelity or emotional abuse in intimate relationships can trigger betrayal trauma, and this can cause deep emotional wounds. Let me know if you have questions. I hope that's pretty clear. Institutional betrayal is when a person is harmed by an institution they depend on. When an institution like a school or a workplace or a governmental body, let's say, fails to protect individuals or acts contrary to its stated values. And this could lead to feelings of betrayal. This becomes very important as I talk about psychological safety and trauma-informed leadership, and as I'm a trauma-informed leadership strategist. This is within a workplace. And I've talked about this before. And if anybody participated in Integrate Network's Trauma-Informed Leadership Symposium back this March 2025, I talked about conflict, compassion, and how we can sort of do that better. And this is one of the ways. Like, there has to be congruency between a workplace's like mission statement and what actually happens in the culture there. So if you feel like the organization in which you work for says one thing and does something the opposite of that, then that can feel like betrayal. If their mission statement says they value diversity and inclusion, but the way that people act, the culture, the way that people behave and speak, the culture in the workplace, if it's contrary to that, especially by leadership, then it can feel like institutional betrayal. Another example could be a government that doesn't protect the rights of marginalized communities, or that responds too slowly or not at all to natural disasters. Sort of like you are expecting the federal government to show up, like in Hurricane Katrina and FEMA and everything. And can you imagine if that sort of natural disaster happened and then there was no support? You would feel like institutional betrayal because there's an expectation that the government is going to show up and help the people in a natural disaster. Andrew has a great question. Can you have betrayal trauma in the workplace or with a leader? Absolutely. Both. It probably happens a lot. And in fact, institutional betrayal, I think, is the place where people experience it the most. Especially where leadership today, is poor, has no loyalty to the people that work for them, often expect loyalty back. And even that imbalance of power and expectation can lead to feelings of mistrust, which, even if it's not betrayal, is certainly going to create conflict and tension in a workplace. So hopefully that answers your question. And with my examples, hopefully that answers your question. Okay, moving on to familial betrayal and interpersonal betrayal. Familial betrayal can involve child abuse or other similar traumas. Children typically depend on a parent for survival. So familial betrayal can be especially damaging when a parent or caregiver fails to protect a child from something else happening, outside the family system or outside the home, or engages in abusive behavior, whether that be emotional, physical, sexual, or neglect. Those are abusive behaviors. So failing to protect a child from something outside of the family or outside the home, and or engaging in abusive behavior, including neglect, this can lead to a profound sense of betrayal. And this is absolutely going to be incredibly impactful for this child if they feel that they were not protected or were actually in danger or suffered abuse or trauma as a result of parents or caregivers or somebody else in the family. It's going to feel like a huge betrayal. Some of that is because there's an expectation in a familial relationship that they're not going to do that they're going to care for you, especially if you're a child. They're not going to hurt you. They're going to protect you. And if they don't, you can feel very much like they've betrayed you. Let me pause before I get into interpersonal betrayal. Andrew has a question. Can you give us an example? Andrew, I'm not sure what you're talking about. Give you an example of which type of betrayal. Interpersonal betrayal involves friends or coworkers, acquaintances, other people, like I said, that you have relationships with to some degree. This is not strangers, it's people you know who violate your trust in some way, such as ghosting you or spreading a rumor about you. Those kinds of things can feel like betrayal as well. Let's talk about some risk factors. Like, are you at risk of being the victim of betrayal or betrayal trauma? Certain groups are more vulnerable than others. This includes populations that are dependent on others, right? So if we go back, let me go all the way back here for a second to this definition here. Betrayal trauma occurs when someone's trust or well-being is violated by an institution or person they depend on for physical, emotional, or financial security. So that dependent on is key there. If you are dependent on someone or something for your survival, and if it's like financial, emotional, or physical security, that's your survival, such as children or the elderly, these folks are more at risk to experience betrayal. Communities of color are at greater risk of institutional betrayal. I feel like that's super clear, at least over here in the United States. Because they're less likely to feel supported and or likely to feel targeted. This is in that situation where the institution or the government isn't meeting the expectations. They're acting in contrary to what we expect, and contrary to what they say. And either if they just leave us high and dry or they are instrumental in that harm, it absolutely would feel like betrayal. Freud points to police brutality as an example. I think you guys can all understand this. She says police are supposed to protect us. That's what we all believe. We depend on them for that. She says, but that's often not the lived experience of people of color. And there are many people of color that could attest to that being their lived experience. So we need to understand that people of color that have that lived experience likely suffer some betrayal trauma and or some trauma responses or reactions post those experiences. There's nothing wrong with them. It's not because of their color that something is wrong with them. It is because of their color. Something happened to them, and that is extremely unfortunate. And we need to pay attention to the impact of that is significant. And will potentially impact how they show up in the world and how they behave with other people, especially how they behave with people of a different color who maybe perpetrated this betrayal on them, but may be very sensitive for them. They may be very fearful or angry about that. That makes sense to me. I had triggered my anger all the time with things that remind me of my trauma or people. It doesn't matter if you intend to or not. Like, that has to do with my lived experiences. So we need to understand that to be true for communities of color. Some other risk factors to experiencing betrayal or betrayal trauma. Research shows that women experience betrayal trauma more often than men, but let me give potentially a limitation to that research. Researchers caution that this may be because women are more likely to report abuse or betrayal by caregivers or people close to them rather than men. So that would be true even if it was in a romantic partnership. Women are more likely to report that, to go get therapy or other kind of help for it than men, which is unfortunate. If men are being betrayed or abused in their relationships, like, they need to feel like it's available to them to go get help as well. So I hope that, a lot more of this talk about mental health care, what that looks like, and seeing a therapist can get destigmatized even more, and especially for men who need that kind of support. Okay, other risk factors. The effects of this trauma may persist across generations. So even if you are not in a dependent position anymore, or not a woman, or not a person of color, it doesn't mean that betrayal trauma can't come for you as well, or be something that you experience. So if people in your past, before you were even born, experienced betrayal trauma, then your risk factor of also experiencing it goes up. This is how epigenetics works. And this is how intergenerational trauma gets passed down. Some of that is the epigenetics of the gene expression. Some of it is poor patterns of behaviors that get repeated over time and get repeated in the next generation. And then there's learning mixed with biology about how we pass this down in different generations. Okay, so children of mothers who suffered their own betrayal trauma are at higher risk of dissociation and other mental health conditions. And as a result, could be vulnerable to more betrayal based on their abilities and or awareness about people in relationships. Like they may just inadvertently walk themselves right in to other relationships where they experience betrayal as a result of their parent experiencing betrayal trauma, and what sort of trickles down the pike as a result of that. Another risk factor are those who have experienced trauma before. And like I said, this is true intergenerationally. Like if the generation before you, before that even, or experienced trauma, then there's a higher risk of you stepping into it. Also, if you experience trauma before in your life, then the risk of you stepping into a relationship that results in betrayal is higher. So and guys, I am the walking poster child for that. Experiencing childhood trauma, I would guess there was some betrayal trauma familially in past generations, as well as there was in mine. And I suffered abuse and neglect at the hands of my caretakers and my family system. Not knowing how that impacted me, I walked myself right into many relationships with friends, workplaces, and romantic partners that ended in betrayal. And so this is exactly how it works. Experiencing trauma before potentially can set you up for experiencing trauma again, which is also why we need a lot of information about this. It's also why we need to understand this in workplaces, right? A lot of these things are not just one-time events for people. And I was talking about that a lot last week with complex PTSD. We're talking about pervasive, ongoing, or chronic trauma situations. If we're talking about communities of color, they likely didn't just have one incident with an institution, maybe where they experienced betrayal. It might be many. The impact of many traumas is huge. Okay. And so, right as you stack up having more trauma experiences, no surprise, basically the worse it is for you and for your functioning and for your mental health and for your relationship development. I think one of the biggest impacts of trauma is seen in relationships. And the next biggest impact of trauma is seen in relationship with ourselves. And so I think talking about these things, especially in workplace and psychological safety, because relationships exist there too, is extremely important. Got another friend in the house, my other buddy, Leanna. Hello. It's good morning for you. I think she's a couple hours behind us, guys. And good afternoon for us. But I'm so glad you made it, especially at the different time. Thank you for being here. All right, let's go to what is the impact of betrayal trauma? What are the responses that a person experiences? What are the symptoms they have post an experience of betrayal trauma? And the effects of this can be really extensive, folks. Again, I'm your walking poster child. Someone can experience emotional distress. Feelings of fear, anger, grief, and confusion are common responses to betrayal. Someone can experience disassociation. Individuals may subconsciously block out memories of the betrayal to cope, leading to dissociative symptoms. And that really means sort of like disconnection, potentially from self, disconnection from reality. Think of dissociation as like kind of going to a little corner of the room inside yourself or inside your head, and blocking out the outside world. To some degree, it's just not wanting to engage with that, and if you experience trauma in childhood, disassociation is more likely because there are less available coping mechanisms for children, including physiologically, in which to deal with traumatic situations. So the way that little children bodies and minds learn how to survive trauma situations by disassociating. And since they physically can't get someplace else often because they're in a place of dependence, they mentally go someplace else. And we can see this symptom be pervasive throughout life as a result of childhood trauma. This can also show up if you experience trauma in later than life. It doesn't just happen with people who experience trauma in childhood. Folks who have experienced betrayal trauma, obviously so, have trust issues and can result in difficulties in forming and maintaining trusting relationships in the future. Absolutely true of me. Some other things that are responses or symptoms, effects of betrayal trauma are things like shock, grief, depression, anxiety, anger, symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder, symptoms of obsessive compulsive disorder, addiction, damaged self-esteem, complex PTSD symptoms, experiencing chronic mistrust, self-doubt, problems in emotional regulation or frequently experiencing emotional dysregulation, and there could be fixation on the perpetrator of the betrayal. So, many of these are me, guys, and betrayal trauma is a result starting with my early childhood trauma and from my parents and my caretakers. And as a result of that, again, hi, you're a walking poster child for the result of betrayal trauma, particularly when it's at the hands of your caretakers. So familial betrayal in childhood. Many of you guys know that I am the spouse of somebody with an addiction, and I was married to my spouse when he was in active addiction for a while. And so there was massive betrayal there as well. And those things have been very impactful. But I think mostly from my childhood trauma, I definitely came out of it with shock, with grief, with anger, with a diagnosis of OCD and a diagnosis of CPTSD. I absolutely have damaged self-esteem and chronic mistrust, and have certainly had issues regulating my emotions because they're big and intense sometimes. And it has been difficult to manage that throughout my life. So this is significant, guys. I didn't ask to be traumatized as a child. But as a result, I have a lot to deal with now as an adult, like a lot to deal with. And this is often these symptoms that I'm talking about here are talking about basically like mental health and psychological symptoms, but there are physical symptoms that come with trauma. There are body problems. There are health issues. There's relationship issues, right? There are all kinds of things that have been negatively impacted by my experiences of trauma. I've been working my ass off half my life to try to undo, redo, relearn, learn healthy, do better, do healthy. And I cannot tell you how much work I have put into this. And most days I still feel like I'm struggling. And then when I think about that, I get real angry at my family system for setting me up for such difficulty in adulthood as a result of all of this shit. Like I said, it's a lot to manage. Be kind, folks. Let's talk about some more potential responses to betrayal. So back in the beginning, I talked about, let's see if I can go all the way back to what that was. Denial, I think, is what I had on this slide. Yes, the role of denial is what we're getting into when we're talking about impact and responses. So denial could also be said as betrayal blindness. And this would be unawareness, not knowing, and or the forgetting someone might exhibit around a betrayal. Freud says some people would seemingly forget the traumatic thing that happened to them in her work and her research. So this often occurs when there was a relationship between the abuser and the abused. Obviously, this is the betrayal. And it seems likely that, or it seems as though this is most likely maybe in, again, a lot of those like very dependent relationships. So we could be in denial about it because we're still in the relationship, like as a child or a dependent adult or in a romantic partnership, right? And so that's one reason that we could have this betrayal blindness. Also, being able to block out the betrayal might be very advantageous. And this is in one of those situations dependent on, under some circumstances, recognizing betrayal may threaten the victim's survival. Even though they've been traumatized by this person, they may also still depend on this person, right? That's an example. Think about a child who's being abused by a parent. That child can't afford to alienate the parent because their whole life depends on the care they're getting. Of course, that's mixed in with abuse, but a child doesn't have a choice about that. They still need somebody to meet those basic needs, even if that somebody is also causing trauma for them. And this can also apply to relationships where victims are financially or emotionally dependent on their abusers, right? So this could be elderly dependent adults. This could be in marital or long-term relationship partnerships. And that could be, if one parent works and one parent doesn't work, the parent who doesn't work might feel financially dependent on the parent who does work. And so may deny the betrayal or the betrayal trauma as a result to stay in that relationship or stay connected to the parent and co-parenting. I don't know, for a lot of reasons that could make sense to me. So you might look and say, like, how could somebody just deny that somebody betrayed them? Well, like, number one, it doesn't feel good to recognize and accept that. You want to talk about something that feels like it punches you in the gut and just like rips out your insides and like lays your entrails down in front of you. Betrayal trauma would be it. And so for many, many reasons, it's hard to confront that, right? It's hard to accept that. And then if we're going to confront and accept that, likely that comes with change, because after we accept that, it's hard to stay in the same situation without recognizing the impact. So then often change needs to come, and people are not always ready for that or feel like they have capacity for that, or that's really scary for them. Even though this situation isn't good, maybe it's potentially very bad, it is what they know. And probably have learned how to navigate that better than being in a different situation. And for all those reasons, denial could come into play. Betrayal denial is frequently subconscious, as in the child and parent relationship. Like the child doesn't realize they're denying it, but they have to do that to survive, right? But it can also be a conscious decision and a protective choice. Research has shown that a closer a victim is to the perpetrator, the higher risk of anxiety, suicidality, and anger. So in these cases, forgetting or blocking out the betrayal serves an important function. It allows a person to stay in a relationship that they really need, and or keeps them at risk of something more intense, like suicidal thoughts and actions. Repressing a betrayal may be a protective factor in some circumstances, and it can also put your mental health at risk if you just continue to deny pain and suffering that you experience. If you continue to deny pain and suffering that you've experienced, it's essentially invalidating yourself and your experiences. It's dismissing yourself, your feelings, and your experiences and the impact that it has had. And if we are dismissive of that, we can't address that in a healthy way. And experiencing dismissal and invalidation has a negative impact in and of itself. It's hard, like I said, it's hard to pretend everything is okay, especially for adults. And those negative emotions that you're trying to repress start leaking out all over the place and may show up as increased anxiety, depression, anger, or symptoms of PTSD or CPTSD. And even according to one study, they've seen a connection between betrayal denial, so denial of betrayal happening to you or betrayal trauma, and borderline personality disorder, which is really interesting to me and actually makes a lot of sense with what I know about borderline personality disorder, and some of the differences between that and CPTSD. Borderline personality disorder, there comes a lot of like repressing, dissociating, depersonalization, blocking, managing things basically in an unhealthy way, and ultimately staying in a place of denial is not healthy for us if we have experienced betrayal or betrayal trauma. It's something that we do need to address, and we need to address the impact it's had on us. Like I said, that's hard to do. It is sticky, difficult work that's not fun. Often people would rather just avoid that work than step in it and do all the work that it takes and all the energy that it takes. So I get it. It's just ultimately those outcomes are worse than walking through the work. Okay, let's talk about some treatment options. How do we heal from betrayal trauma? Healing from this kind of trauma is a complex process that often requires support, like therapy. Engaging with a therapist who specializes in trauma and trauma-informed care, as I often talk about, this is not a requirement to be a therapist. Trauma-informed care is not something we learn in our academic programs. It is not something required for our licensure and our ability to practice. Trauma-informed care at this stage in 2025 is a choice. It is a choice for therapists to engage in trauma-informed care. So if you have experienced betrayal trauma and you are seeking about a therapist or any healthcare provider, you maybe need to ask and check if they're trauma-informed, and if they offer trauma-informed care through their services, because this is potentially a make or break in your healing process. And trauma-informed care can provide a safe place for you to process feelings and develop coping mechanisms, right? And we can't process feelings or develop new learning, including behavioral coping mechanisms, if we remain blind or repressing our trauma. Like, actually processing things means that we have to sort of bring it up again. We can't just leave it buried. And to do that, I would 100% recommend a therapist over a wellness coach, over literally any other professional out there. I don't care what kind of therapist that you find, but finding a licensed therapist if this is you. This is deep stuff, guys. This is complicated. This is comprehensive. This infiltrates and influences many parts of your life and functioning. And even if it has not resulted in a mental health disorder and diagnoses, I would almost put money on the fact that your mental health has been negatively impacted, probably in significant and potentially in extreme ways. And I quite frankly would not feel comfortable giving the charge on the treatment for that kind of thing with anybody who doesn't understand how the brain and psychology works. Cognitive restructuring is a sensitive and vulnerable treatment intervention. And if you don't know how to do that well, you run the risk of harm, of placing in things that were not there, ideas, memories, experiences, sensations. And if you are not trained in doing clinical work, clinical practice, I would not recommend you working with somebody who is in the beginning stages of recognizing and addressing their betrayal trauma. Now, if you are somebody who has recognized and addressed your betrayal trauma with a therapist, and we are somewhere down the line where some new things are popping up, of course, go back to that therapist. But if you feel like it's maybe some specific things that you work on, or maybe enhancing some skills that you already have, or a specific skill to build, maybe then we can look into something like wellness coaching, or a different form of support. But absolutely, if you are just realizing or just starting to walk through your healing journey, I highly recommend a licensed therapist as the healthcare support that you get. Okay, what else can we do? There are support groups. Connecting with others who have experienced similar betrayals can foster understanding and healing. And that is a space often where we can feel seen and belong and know that these other people have experienced similar things. And that can be a safe space for people, and knowing that you're not alone in your experiences or your reactions and responses. We heal from betrayal trauma by taking care of ourselves. Practicing self-care and mindfulness can help folks manage their emotional responses and promote healing. Understanding betrayal trauma is crucial for recognizing its impact on mental health and relationships. Like I said, it might have the most impact on relationships, and then our relationship with ourselves, which I think also then translates into how well our mental health is. With appropriate support and coping strategies, individuals can work toward healing and rebuilding trust in themselves and others. It absolutely is possible. It's hard work. I will say that. Doing the work myself and doing it for a long time. Also trying to rebuild trust after massive betrayal in my marriage, in the very early part of my marriage with my spouse, falling back into active addiction and lying to me about it for 3 years was extremely impactful on our relationship and the trust that exists between us. And so trying to rebuild trust in myself and in our relationship and in him is not been easy, folks, not for the faint of heart. It is possible, but you got to want to do this work. You have to want it, and you have to want it when it is hard. And you have to sort of keep going until you get there. So it is possible. I also am the therapist for people that have experienced betrayal trauma. I somehow have found myself in a little bit of a niche for partners in marriages who experience narcissistic abuse and trying to get out of those marriages, and often involved in very long divorce and custody proceedings after they try to leave this relationship with their narcissistic partner. Lots of betrayal trauma in those situations. And so I have found myself the therapist for many partners of marriages like that and exiting marriages like that in my career. And so I've seen it happen. I see individuals rebuild trust and strengthen themselves, get to healthier relationships, and feel healed and whole and seen and belong post betrayal trauma. So it is possible. It takes work and dedication from you. Experiencing betrayal trauma may lead to feeling hurt, alone, or scared, but there is hope. As I've been saying, it can be healed. Find a trauma-informed therapist is, again, my suggestion. A therapist who works specifically with trauma will understand unique challenges you're facing in your healing journey. Maybe learn some more about relational cultural therapy. This type of therapy is built on the premise that people need connections to flourish and even to stay alive. I absolutely practice this way. I feel like a lot of social workers do. We come from a biopsychosocial spiritual assessment, and I say that as whole person and whole context, and absolutely fall under the belief that we need other people to stay alive, let alone thrive. Relational cultural therapy views isolation or siphoning off of yourself as a major source of suffering at both personal and cultural level. A clinician will work to form a strong bond with you. This is often why people are in therapy with me for a long time. It takes quite some time to form a strong bond with your provider, with your clinician, with your healing provider, if you have experienced betrayal trauma. I also find this is true with CPTSD and early childhood trauma. Building a strong bond with the person helping you may often take time. So take that as advice. Folks, like if you've never been in therapy before, or if you're thinking of starting therapy, understand that it could very well take you years to form the trust and the bond with your therapist that you need to go to the deep levels of your pain and suffering and find healing from that. But it will start there, forming a strong bond with a clinician, and then they will then help you strengthen your relationships outside of therapy with other people. This is what I do all day, every day, guys, in my psychotherapy practice. I am licensed in Virginia and Maryland. And if you need psychotherapy services, I have a couple of slots opened. Of course, I'm doing all virtual therapy. So you can be anywhere in the state of Virginia or anywhere in the state of Maryland. And I can walk you through this as I've done for countless other people via psychotherapy in my career. Okay, some other things that you can do, treatment options, ways for healing, practice mindfulness. This practice, which includes some forms of meditation, invite you to notice your thoughts and emotions in the present moment from a non-judgmental place. So just observing, describing, not judging what's happening inside your body, outside your body, and your thoughts, those types of things. Trauma-informed yoga. This is yoga adapted for trauma survivors of trauma and can create a relaxing environment for healing to begin. This is one of the areas many folks in my Integrate Trauma Informed network engage in. One of my mentors, Julie Johnson, is a trauma-informed yoga instructor. She works often with mind-body healers in different forms. Even though she is not a psychotherapist, she sort of works in the mind-body and healing space as a trauma-informed yoga instructor and a trauma-informed, basically learning and design instructor. So that is one self-care and pathway towards healing. Interestingly enough, in one study of women with a history of military sexual trauma and PTSD symptoms, trauma-informed yoga participants reported less severe symptoms, improvements in nutrition and sleep, and reduced pain and reduced medication use. So those are just some outcomes from using trauma-informed yoga if you have suffered trauma. Jason says it takes time to get through it and do the work. Absolutely, dude. Like, I can't even emphasize that enough. Just the amount of time it has taken me alone to work through that. I can't even describe it to you guys. I've had so many different phases and levels of awareness and understanding of my trauma, how it's impacted me, how it's showing up now. I've literally been in therapy for 20 years. Not with the same therapist, not continuously. I've had some breaks here and there, but in recognizing where this stuff continues to circle back around and like the next layer of like awareness and healing that I need to get to, it's extensive. And some of my clients, you know, especially I've had my private practice over 9 years. I've had some of my clients damn near that long because building rapport and trust takes a long time. And this work in general is just not cut and dried. It's very complicated. It's complex based on our human experiences and everything we bring into it. So this is also why I say psychotherapy is a tailor-made healthcare treatment option for people. Like, I have to adjust what I'm doing in therapy, even though, you know, two people might have a lot of the same symptoms and the same diagnosis, but they are different people with different life circumstances from the past and different life circumstances in the present. And that informs my work with a person, which is why it's all tailor-made to that person. And for me, as well as for the people I work with, the more that we build that rapport and trust, the better the work is. The more we can dig in, the safer they feel to be honest with me. The more gentle challenge, you know, I can introduce, which can drive us towards change can happen. Change kicks up activations in our nervous systems. So they're going to have to really trust you as the clinician to be able to allow activations in their nervous system to get to a place of change. I don't really like all the conversation happening right now with AI and mental health, which is why I'm working on a white paper with the ethicist in our trauma-informed network and some other people from that on this. It is not a replacement, and it's just really difficult to talk about conversations to scale mental health treatment when the reason that it works so well is because of the very personal and individualized nature of psychotherapy treatment. And for things like complicated issues like addiction and trauma, complex PTSD, childhood trauma that's impacting in adulthood, these things are not cut and dried. And scaling treatment for these, to me is like nearly almost impossible because It requires connection to people. We don't trust people. It takes a while to develop trust, even with a human service provider designed to provide unconditional regard and to build trust with you. And it still takes a long time. And then we have to do the work beyond that, all while living life and having things pop up along the way. Yes, it takes a long time. Yes, it takes a lot of capacity from therapists. That's why you don't have as many available and they keep people for a while. But you ask those therapists that do that work and they will tell you that it's transformative in the lives of their clients. And sometimes it's a matter of somebody living past basically their projected end of life date, whether that be suicide or something else. And I've had many clients that have suffered early childhood trauma, betrayal trauma, have CPTSD or other things that literally tell me, like, I don't know what to do now because I didn't plan to live past 22. Like, I don't know what to do with my life. I don't know what to do with myself. I don't know what to do about relationships. I never thought I would be here. I made no plan. I have no skills. I don't know what to do. And so then even in that regard, not just like treatment healing of trauma, but also adult functioning is extremely difficult for people that have experienced past trauma. It's one of the ways trauma influences us and has a negative impact that just has a lasting ripple effect. And I talked a lot about that with complex PTSD last week, especially trauma experienced in childhood just really does not set up those children to be healthy, functioning adults. And so folks that have had these trauma experiences may very well just to struggle in what we consider the normal and typical things in life. And it absolutely makes sense that they would. They've been incredibly impacted, whether they can see it or not, from these experiences. And that is why treatment can take a while. Especially if they don't start treatment until adulthood. My Lord, and if it happened in childhood, the number of years they've spent, that we could say in the unhealthy, dysfunctional space is huge, so we cannot do that quickly. And the fact that we think that we could with AI is damn near disgusting to me. It's like crazy. It's like people obviously that have no idea how this works would suggest something like that. It's almost insulting to the people that are doing the work here, not just me being the provider, but the individuals in therapy putting in this hard work. Like, it can't go faster than it's going to go, right? And that's a very individual experience that we often don't have control over, even if you're doing the work the whole time, right? Like, how long it's going to take for you to like feel differently or see the change is unknown, but I know that it does come if people stay the course. So that's all for our content today on betrayal trauma. Be sure to tell your friends. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel. That's just YouTube/@timelesstherapist. How can I help you with understanding betrayal trauma after this podcast episode? Well, you can go to my website, www.sarahobrienlcsw.com, and grab a couple of freebies, particularly the Trauma Responses Quick Reference Guide. It's a one-pager with some typical trauma responses that you can access for easy reference. Also, a mindfulness exercises ebook, so different options to practice mindfulness. This is important in our healing and our self-care post-trauma, post-betrayal trauma experiences. I also have a few digital download products. I have many. I'm just pointing out two that I have here, which is the Self-Care, Love, and Growth digital workbook. It's just $9. Go to my website, fill out the form, pay the $9, and it comes directly to your inbox. Same is true for the sustainable self-care practices. This is a digital workbook for you to develop healthy and sustainable habits that address your specific self-care needs. I also provide one-to-one skills coaching for personal development. Like if you want to enhance on what you've learned in therapy, if you want to go beyond what you've been doing, if you're at a new place and want to learn a new skill, trauma-informed coaching is available through me. I also do consulting services, so business to business for executives, team leads, managers, whole workplaces, hospital systems, universities, classrooms, whatever. I can come speak, train, do a webinar, do a workshop, whatever you might need on all the topics in which I have expertise on. So be sure to, again, check out my website for all of that. So we're at the August 14th. That's today. We talked about complex PTSD last week, betrayal trauma today. Next week, I am talking about OCD. And the following week, I am talking about a very not well known, not well studied, not a whole lot of options for picking disorder or excoriation. So that should be interesting. Please tune in later this month. Again, my name is Sarah Fargo O'Brien. I'm a licensed psychotherapist in Virginia and Maryland. I am a trauma-informed leadership strategist and trauma-informed coach and consultant. I get to wear many hats and do many jobs as a result of being a trauma-informed professional. I am the director of student wellness for Chasen's fantastic nonprofit. I am a mental health content writer and webinar and workshop facilitator and content creator for Integrate Trauma Informed Network. I am adjunct faculty at Cleveland State University for master's level clinical social work students. And all of these roles, I am trauma informed in the how I am a faculty, how I am a mental health content writer, how I am a coach, consultant, therapist. Trauma informed is the name of my game. That is how I do things. Also, because I like to have fun too, especially with more trauma healing coming to me, I am in many more happy and fun spaces. And I like to create fun and colorful things. So check out my merch shop, my Redbubble store. You can scan that QR code or go to my website, www.sarahobrienlcsw.com, and look for shop, and it will take you there. Thank you. Andrew says it is a great show today, friends. Appreciate that. I'm glad that you enjoyed it. Andrew's podcast, Let's Be Diverse, Solutions for HR Leaders, Managers in the Workforce, and really talking about leadership in HR, is the sponsor for the Healing Hour podcast. If you take anything away from today, understand that you matter, you are worthy, you are important. Even if you feel alone, you are not alone. I cannot tell you how many times I have felt alone, and it did not matter to me that somebody said, you are not alone. Even if you feel alone, I would have said, F you. How I feel is what the reality is. And so I hear you. But I don't want you to believe that to be true, even though that's how you feel. I totally understand feeling that way, but it's not a truth. It is a true feeling. Don't siphon yourself off, though. Do your very best to find at least one supportive person, even if it's a licensed psychotherapist like me, to help support you on your healing journey. Next week, we're talking about obsessive compulsive disorder. So tune in if you want to learn about that. If there's any topic that you guys want me to talk about, let me know. A lot of my posts coming up will be about nervous system care, breathing, some healing practices, some things to do instead of going to ChatGPT or some other AI therapy bot with all of your deep, dark secrets. I'm going to have suggestions and options for you, coping, healing things, and how to take care of yourselves better. Be sure to check out all the stuff on my website, all the services I can provide, all my digital products, past podcast episodes, podcasts I've been guesting on, workshops, webinars, things like that are free to you that you can see. I have videos of those on my website. Again, find everything about me at www.sarahobrienlcsw.com. Thank you for my friends for popping in, Chasen, Andrew, and Leanna, like my 3 tried and true musketeers. I appreciate you guys always supporting me and popping in to ask your questions and comment and participate in the healing hour. That's it for another episode. I am your host, Sarah Fargo O'Brien, and I will see you guys next Thursday back at our regular time, back at 11 o'clock. I'll see you then.